Hello, and welcome to You Can Grow Your Own Way, a conversation for parents and carers of neurodivergent children. I feel so privileged you are taking time out of your busy life to learn all about the ways to interpret neurodivergence for you and your child. Remember, all advice on this podcast is general and may not specifically apply to your child, so we encourage you to also talk to your GP, paediatrician or specialist to see if what you've learned will help your family. A great, big, warm and friendly hello from me to you on You Can Grow Your Own Way. I am coming to you today with a topic that I think really needs a little bit of an introduction. We're going to be talking about neurodiversity and comorbidities. So for those that don't know what comorbidities are, they are regularly occurring issues that can be diagnosed that are often partnered with particular types of neurodiversity. So it has statistically significant numbers of occurrences to show that a particular type of neurodiversity or neurodiversity in general partners very strongly with these other disorders or issues. A little warning that this is a very heavy topic. We will today be talking about significant mental health issues. We will also be discussing suicide. So if you've got little ones in the car who are also listening, this might not be the ideal episode for them. Also, this can feel very, very weighty as a parent, and I really want to make sure that if you are going to be listening to this, you recognise that you may need to either take breaks, take pauses, or put in place some self-care afterwards for a number of days. This might percolate because it is really intense and it can be scary to think about these things in relation to our kids. However, forewarned is forearmed, and we are the parents that are learning about these so that we can support our children in the best way we possibly can. So with that disclaimer aside, I do believe that this is an incredibly important thing for us to all be learning. So I am very, very excited that we have Leah Heale on this conversation talking to us about this. She's an accredited disability social worker who runs Heale Collab. It's a neurodiversity affirming private practice in Melbourne. And she entered the neurodiversity affirming community as a parent 5 years ago, and she's since received her own ADHD diagnosis. So we're talking lived experience here, and we know the beauty of talking to people with lived experience. She combines her professional and lived experience to support neurodivergent adults and families of neurodivergent children. And she spent most of her adult life living with undiagnosed chronic illness. But it was not until she learnt about the links between neurodivergence and co-occurring health conditions that she was finally able to understand her own health challenges. She shares her knowledge and experience in the hope that the next generation of neurodivergent kids can experience our world without sensory and emotional trauma, and how incredibly powerful is that? So let's just dive straight in there, get into this really big conversation, and I love welcoming Leah to the show. Hello, Leah. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a very big conversation in front of us, and it's pretty heavy, but I think really, really important. So I'm thrilled that you could be with us today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
So, look, I love when I asked you to give me some notes on what you wanted to talk about. The first thing that you put on there is why this conversation is really important. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to qualify before we get done into it. So please tell me why you think talking about neurodivergence and its comorbidities is important.
Oh, look, there's multiple reasons. First one for me, I think, is we're beginning to learn that there are lots of commonly occurring conditions with neurodiversity, but a lot of those conditions are conditions that are really hard to get diagnosed. So there's a lot of neurodivergent people floating around out there with all sorts of weird symptoms that often don't get listened to, or get put down to anxiety because obviously you're an anxious person and whatever. But actually they're real things that just doctors don't always know everything. So part of it is, just helping people actually know that these things exist, and understanding, a bit, what might be going on for them, because it was certainly a massive eye-opener for me. Like in terms of what I was saying with how long it can take things to get diagnosed, an example is average diagnostic delay for POTS, which is postural orthostatic something or other. Uh, anyway, average diagnostic delay is nearly 6 years.
Yeah, wow. That's huge.
And 59% of patients were told by their doctor that the symptoms were all in their head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah. Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility, sometimes it can take up to 10 years to get diagnosed. Also, another thing I've found is when we look at co-occurring conditions in regards to mental health, a lot of people, more often women, get diagnosed with mental health conditions and don't get diagnosed as neurodivergent at all.
Yep. Yep.
So there's a
Yep.
lot of autistic women going around who have previously been given diagnosis of borderline personality disorder or anxiety and depression and just ignored all the other stuff. And with anxiety and depression, you might have those things as well. But yeah, there's something underlying, and if you don't understand what's underlying, you're not going to be able to ever deal with your anxiety and depression.
That's exactly right. And look, the main aim for our podcast is often to empower parents, because we're talking to parents of and carers of children who are neurodivergent. And you know, when you think of a parent who, let's say they received a diagnosis in the last 3 to 4 years, their child is growing, evolving, might also be dealing with hormones. There's a lot going on. They're trying to learn the best they can about the recent diagnosis of their child to then place the burden on them of looking for additional symptoms to understand what's happening, and then find another thing they have to advocate for with a GP or a pediatrician. It's a really, really huge task. I can speak from my own experience, not in the neurodivergent world, but just, you know, in some compassion. So I have endometriosis, and the average diagnosis delay for endometriosis is 10 years. And the reason I bring that up is I know exactly what it's like sitting in a doctor's office talking about symptoms, being told that you just need to take more Panadol and really it's just your period. So to think about that when you're also someone who's constantly feeling like you're not being understood from a social or a cognitive or an empathetic context, and then you have a specialist telling you that what you are feeling is not valid, that has to be such a massive challenge. Hence why I think it's so great that we're having this conversation today, that, you know, we've got these parents who could be listening in and saying, hey, this might actually be what's going on for my child, and I am allowed to put my foot down and say, we need to investigate this more intently.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and you sort of touched on it there. Often, especially autistic people, if they try and explain their issues and what's going on to their doctor and they feel misunderstood or they're dismissed, then they stop telling their doctors what's going on, because a doctor has told them that's normal. So they then proceed through life accepting that whatever pain or discomfort or issue that they're having is normal, because they've
And not
been
only
told by someone who's meant to know that it is normal. So
not
then they
only
won't
is
tell
it not
anyone else.
unfair, but that's
Yeah,
dangerous.
yeah. And that's, again, why it's a massive issue, because, yeah, you get told in your younger years or in early adulthood often is when a lot of this stuff, I think, you know, can come to the fore. And you go and you're like, oh, yeah, that's normal. Oh, I don't know, done tests, there's nothing wrong. And so then you just don't tell doctors again. And I've kind of had it where, like, you know, 10, 15 years later, I started talking to a doctor and they just look at me like, what? I'm like, oh, yeah, it's been like that for years. I got told it was normal.
For those who aren't watching on YouTube, I just reeled backwards, because to be in a position where you've had to carry something for that long because somebody has invalidated your response, to then find out that it was a problem all along, like that's a huge emotional burden to have to overcome. And it's just unfair, really. It's just unfair. Yeah.
Yeah, so it can lead to, and then that can obviously lead to obviously very delayed diagnosis and delayed diagnosis of other things,
Mm.
like even more acute things, because you've now got this history of not really trusting
Your body.
and trusting your body. Exactly. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I've got this other pain. Oh, well, I'm sure it's nothing because everything else has always been nothing.
And look,
Um,
on top of that as well, I'm just thinking of my 9-year-old, and he has huge issues, and part of it's to do with his autism around interception.
yeah, yeah,
And so if you're already not trusting your body responses,
yeah,
oh my goodness.
yeah. And I think one reason why medical staff can often dismiss issues with pain and other things is a lot of autistic people will present that pain a lot differently.
Mm,
So the
mm.
doctor will look and go, you're telling me your pain's an 8 out of 10, but I don't think you're
Responding
looking
like
bad
it's an 8 out
enough.
of 10.
And your
Yeah.
responses don't look like an 8 out of 10. So I'm going to
Yeah.
ignore that you've said an 8 out of 10 and I'm going to decide it's not that bad. Yeah, sorry. And that is an interception thing. Like, it's a thing of sometimes you can know
Oh,
it hurts, but your
we've
body's
lost
not
you, Leah.
really reacting to that pain. Or
Mm,
sometimes the bad pain doesn't feel that bad, but the tiny little paper cut, like, is 100 times worse.
hmm.
Yeah, so you hear quite a few stories of like parents who don't realize their kids' arms are broken because the child isn't really showing that much distress
Yeah.
till at
Yeah.
some stage realize that,
Yeah.
oh, this actually looks a lot worse than your response suggested. So that's certainly one big important factor of why we
Mm,
need to talk about these issues.
mm,
And the other one that gets a bit heavier still
mm.
is then the mortality rates for
Yep. Yep.
neurodivergent and autistic people, and
Yep.
also, unfortunately, the suicide
Yep.
rates,
Yep.
both of which are significantly higher
Yeah.
in the autistic and ADHD population.
Yeah.
There's a fairly recent study done in New South Wales, actually, which
Mm.
suggests that the mortality rates for autistic individuals were 2 times that of the general population.
Yeah, it's
Um,
massive.
yeah. And then we've also got, in terms of ADHD, reduced life expectancy of about 7 years for males and 9 years for
Mm,
females.
mm. Yep.
Um, and the thought with some of that is, like, it's not the fact that you have ADHD or autism in and of itself is what will kill you. It's more impulsive decisions. So a lot of
Hmm.
we all know young boys in cars chuck in ADHD on top of that, unmedicated, and that can be quite problematic.
Yep.
But also things
Medication.
like, and even just things like not being able to make as wise
Yes.
lifestyle decisions, if we want to call it
Yes.
that. Don't want
Yep.
to, put
No,
too
no, I
much
know exactly what you're
blame
talking
on it,
about.
but
Yeah.
it is this
Yeah.
thing of when it's a lot harder for us to have that sort of the permanency and the being able to actually see into the future.
Hmm.
You kind of, it's hard to make a decision for future self
Yes.
because
Yep.
our brains just don't really see that. So our decisions will often be made more on the immediate needs.
And in fairness, it often comes with complexities around how executive function clicks in. And so if you're using all of that effort for executive function for particular tasks, you're then not using it to think about whether it's diet or alcohol, or as you said, getting into a car with a drunk driver or speeding too fast, or all of those things have to take a back seat in terms of the decisions that you're making and the effort that you're putting in.
Yeah. And like for myself, my executive functioning means that I get to the end of the day and I don't really have the capacity to think about dinner.
Yep.
So
Yep.
having a healthy home cooked dinner is quite difficult when by that time of night you're gone, your brain's out of it.
Yep. And Look, and there's so many, and we won't go all the way into that because there's a whole thing we could talk about. But I also think about that in terms of, is it easier for you to have to plan a week's worth of meals, create a grocery list, supermarket may be too overwhelming. So then you've got to organize for delivery, all of the steps that go into that, as opposed to right now I can either jump on my phone and get something delivered to my door, or I could walk down the street and I can grab something.
Yeah.
And look, it's not only the neurodivergent space that have to make those decisions in an overly complicated life. That is hard.
Yeah. So it is often that thing of, and where is your capacity going through the day as to, if I prioritize cooking dinner, what am I having to not be able to do at other times of the day? So, so for all of those reasons, it means that, mortality rate is higher. And then also there is, that there can't, we will touch on mental health later. But there often ends up being a lot of co-occurring mental health conditions, more because of trying to exist in our current world as an autistic person, not because of your autism in and of itself. So you then often end up with anxiety and depression, and a lot of suicidal ideation. I found some pretty startling statistics, and I can't remember if I've popped them where I can see them right now, in terms of there was a decent amount of kids who were expressing suicidal ideation before the age of 8. Autistic kids. So, and that is not because they're autistic. That is because these autistic kids are not.
They don't feel valued
in
the
an
world.
environment that school, wherever, that supports their poor little brains, and they just get completely overwhelmed, and it's just this desire to not exist because
If you
existing right
overlay
now
that
is
with the
really
current, if you overlay that with the current epidemic we see around bullying for young people, and then you're looking at someone who feels different, stands out as different, the likelihood that they're then going to be experiencing bullying and exacerbating that feeling of difference that they have. I can tell you, Mr. Nine he said it. And the complexity we have with that is that he has obsessions around, like he really, really loves learning about gods. It's his thing. And so the complexity we have is that we don't know if he truly understands that when he talks about it, he's not going to go and hang with Hades. He's not headed off to Valhalla. That what you're talking about is actually something that means the cessation of life. And it's very interesting to try and, as a parent, navigate that conversation in a way where you want them to feel loved and supported. You certainly don't want to be exacerbating any of those feelings, but you've got to try and work out, where do they sit on that? Is this imaginary? Am I daydreaming? Am I serious about, like, what is all of that?
And you also can't shut it down.
No,
not
at all.
If you shut it down, then they're not going to tell you next time.
They'll never tell me.
Yep. My kiddo was 7.
Yeah. Wow.
When they first voiced those kind of thoughts, and that it stayed around for quite a long time.
Yeah. Wow.
And it very much, I can look back now and understand that it was very much, this is just, it looks like the easiest way to not deal with how hard
everything.
this is right now.
Yeah. Yep.
So that is also another huge part of co-occurring conditions, which is unfortunately they shouldn't co-occur as much as they do.
No. But if we don't talk about the big elephant in the room, nobody knows how serious that elephant truly is.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for introducing that. And I think it's just given us why this is such a weighty conversation. I would like to say to the parents and carers who are listening, whenever we talk about big, heavy topics, I know that we're already emotionally wrung out. We're already exhausted. We're already stretched. So please make sure that you are looking after yourself while you listen to this. If you need to stop and take a break, if you need to go away and you need to come back, if you need to go and get a cup of tea, whatever it is you need to do to make sure that you can get through this with the loaded conversation that we're having, so that you come out of it still being able to be the best emotional self that you can be, please do that, because this is here to inform. It's not here to bring you down, even though these topics are very hard to talk about.
And I think the thing to hold on to in all of this is, in learning about this, in understanding the risks, we're in such a better place to support our kids, and hopefully mean that they're not going to be the kids who sort of have as many issues and complications, and they're going to be the kids that can talk to us about them when they happen.
So well said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, let's dive in. Let's talk about those comorbidities. Particularly, I notice you've highlighted the ones that get missed the most, which is really great because they're the things we need to understand. You pick where you would like to start.
Yeah, I'll start with sort of the physical health co-occurring conditions. And there's something that they actually co-occur so often with each other, outside of whether or not someone is neurodivergent. But I suspect that if they're co-occurring with each other, you're likely to be neurodivergent as well, looking at the numbers. But the three, they co-occur so often together, these three, that they're referred to as the trifecta.
Okay.
So the trifecta is mast cell activation syndrome, which people generally refer to as MCAS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is POTS, and there's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS, or hypermobility. Hypermobility is just sort of a different present. Ehlers-Danlos is a type of hypermobility, I suppose is the best way to describe it, but you need to, like, certain things need to be hypermobile in certain ways to get an Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, whereas other people will just find they might be hypermobile in certain joints, or also if you've got hypermobile joints, you've also likely got kind of hypermobile organs.
Yeah, okay.
Which then leads into a lot of other issues.
Right.
Because they don't necessarily, stay exactly where
Behave the
they're
way everybody
meant
expects
to.
them
And so a lot of
to.
hypermobile people will have issues with quite slow gut motility because they just don't have the right strength and shape and everything to keep it all moving nicely.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're the three, they're the trifecta. And there's an amazing graphic the pediatric cardiologist put together, which I'll get you a link in the show notes.
Yeah,
I
I'll
always
pop it in
hear
the
people
show
say
notes.
that. I've never got to say it. So there you go.
Yeah, say
Link
it.
in the show notes.
Put it in the show notes.
And the thing I really like about this graphic is it shows how much of those three conditions, the trifecta, actually overlap.
Yeah, wow.
And
Okay.
also how systemic they are. So they often will affect multiple different body systems. And then the type of symptoms that they have will kind of overlap with each other, to the point where people are like, I don't understand. Do I have this particular symptom because of this condition, that condition, the other one? And I kind of get to the point of going, it doesn't matter what condition's causing it. It's a symptom. I need to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of common symptoms, we're talking a lot about pain. We're talking a lot about fatigue. We're talking a lot of POTS is often a lot of dizziness.
Yeah.
Often, if you're feeling a bit unwell, if you're dehydrated, you stand up too quickly and the world will spin.
Mm.
I used to stand up and the world would go black
Yeah, okay.
every time I stood up. Yeah, I'd take 4 steps, get to the corner of the couch, have to hold onto the couch because the world had gone completely black. I'd
Yeah.
just wait a while and then I'd just walk off because it was better.
Mm.
And that was my life for years. Again, it just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another sort of common symptom. But it, yeah, as I said, can affect pretty much every single part of the body. Like,
Mm.
you can get like issues with your heart, like heart palpitations, or like blood pressure issues,
Mm.
fluid in your hands and your feet, and issues with temperature control. Can get really hot or really cold, or just can't get the right temperature.
Mm.
Sleep, a lot of sleep issues. Like,
Yeah.
it just kind of goes on and on.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and yeah, so they are the 3 big sort of physical health conditions which really hard to get diagnosed.
Mm.
Even once you're pretty sure you know what your issue is, finding a doctor who actually knows enough about it isn't always that easy. And
Yeah.
if you don't know what your issue is, then the likelihood that a doctor is going to actually work it out and tell you is not particularly high. Having
Yeah.
said that, I think pediatricians are getting a bit better about understanding the link between hypermobility and autism. I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that is potentially something that will be picked up, is
Mm.
more likely, or is getting better.
Mm.
But otherwise, doesn't seem to be a lot of awareness. Doesn't seem to be a lot of medical stuff. And I've worked out one of the big reasons why is because the medical system is divided into silos.
Mm-hmm.
All your specialists focus on one body system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, these
The occurrences.
conditions are not silos. These conditions go
Yeah.
across everything. So
Mm.
you'll go to a cardiologist and he'll look and go, oh, okay, this is what's going on with your heart. I can treat that bit and I can do your heart.
Mm.
And then you'll try and figure out, who do I talk to about this other weird problem that I'm having over
Yeah.
here? And to get someone to look at the big picture isn't
Yes.
always that easy, which again is
Yeah.
why sometimes it can be easier for these things to be diagnosed in kids, because a pediatrician does actually have more of
Look
a
at everything.
holistic
Yes.
view. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Mhm.
that's my theory as to one of the reasons why it's hard to get these things diagnosed. Also, things like MCAS, a lot of doctors don't even think exists.
Yeah, great. That's helpful.
Yeah, and so MCAS is sort of, yeah, your immune system, like how your body works with histamines and all of this
Yes.
kind of stuff. And it just affects pretty much every body
Mm.
system.
Mm.
But you don't know why. And they seem like really random symptoms. So to even link them all and
Mm.
realize that all of these things are likely caused by one big
Mm.
overarching thing can,
Yeah.
yeah, be quite hard to do.
Uh, I'm just going to jump in there as well and say what I'm picking up and hearing, especially when we were talking about how overwhelming it can be for a parent who's already starting to try and grapple with how to support and help their neurodivergent child, is that if you see something that's out of the box, have somewhere you can write it down so that when you go to your pediatrician, you have what might seem like completely irrelevant and disconnected symptoms, and you can still at least share them and they may be able to join the dots.
Yeah. And I think it's also a thing of like, listen to your kids, but also
Mm.
observe your kids,
Yeah.
because often they're not going to be able to tell you something, but if you watch, you might notice something. Like when I was
Mm.
talking before about like the world would just go black, I watched my kiddo get out of bed one day and they walked about 4 steps and then they just sort of leaned forward and put their hand on the bed mattress.
Mm.
And they just kind of stayed that way for a minute and then they kind of seemed okay. And I'm like, were you just feeling dizzy? Yeah, I often feel dizzy. I've told you that before. Well, I don't quite remember that, but okay. But it was, I just kind of, in that moment, went, that reminds me of what I used to do.
Mm.
I'm going to ask about that. And in asking about that, it actually got more of a response and I actually got a bit more information than had.
If you had waited for them to tell you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because they were
Yeah.
convinced that they had, but I don't remember, or if they had, it was at a time where it did not sink in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, yeah,
Well, they
sometimes,
yelled at you about the cereal that you didn't make for them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so sometimes just observing our kids and then being curious
Yes.
can also help us understand a bit what's going on. Also, yeah, don't dismiss the random pains they
Mm.
complain about. If you've got kids who don't like walking long distances, again,
Mm.
potentially you've got a hypermobile kid because
Okay.
it
Okay.
takes a lot more effort
Mm-hmm.
to walk when you've got lax muscles, like
Yes.
yeah, using a lot more energy to try and keep
Yeah.
everything together and actually make them work properly. Yeah,
Yep.
so
Yep.
things like
Yep.
that that
Yep.
might go, why would I tell a pediatrician that my kid doesn't really like walking very far? Like, don't most kids not like walking? Yeah, it can
Mm.
actually be indicating something else.
Yeah. I'm getting my own alarm bells. Mr. Nine regularly tells me that his legs are tired when I'm like, I don't understand. We've barely walked anywhere. Are you just trying to get out of walking? Okay, cool. Mum is taking note.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is coming from someone who, as a child, hated walking and could
Yeah.
never understand why my parents thought it was great and would make me do it so often.
Yeah. Interesting. There we go. Okay. Whew.
Yeah.
Now I've got a quick question. Did you have it down to talk about ARFID or can I bring that up?
I didn't, but you can definitely bring it up.
Yeah, cool. I think it spans both physical and mental, and that's why I thought before we dive into your other physicals, and while my brain is remembering it,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it didn't disappear. So ARFID, and I'm going to bring up the actual the long explanation because I don't know it off the top of my head. So it is avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder. So it's only recently been added to the DSM-5 a diagnosis, and it sits in the same category as all other eating disorders. So it sits with anxiety, not anxiety, sorry. It sits with bulimia, and within that space
Anorexia
there.
nervosis.
But it appears differently.
Yes.
So rather than largely looking at something that is a mental health condition, sort of similar to OCD in that it's a form of psychological control that then magnifies and exacerbates, it's largely often sensorily based. And so when the sensory system is so overwhelmed by food textures, food smells, they will literally stop eating or only eat very small kinds of food, which can cause all kinds of possible nutrition deficiencies, obviously weight loss, and a range of other symptoms. So I know most of us will see that our kidlets have very strong preferences. I think the thing here to note is when it gets to the point that you cannot navigate a way to provide them nutritional content and they are solely eating chips and white bread, or they will go a day and they will flat out refuse to eat anything, that is definitely a time to mention it to your pediatrician and get intervention. It is way more common than people would like to think, so very, very important that our
Yes.
parents understand.
And very important to know that it is not picky eating.
No.
It is not a preference. It is not a, oh, but I wanted you to give me Macca's, so I'm not going to eat this food that you've cooked. It is this food that you've put in front of me does not feel safe.
Yes.
I cannot put this food in my mouth.
Correct.
I read a really cool article a long time ago, and it basically was saying, imagine you were sitting at your dining table and everyone was sitting down to eat raw chicken breast, and everyone else around you was tucking into this raw chicken breast because it was delicious. How would your stomach and your
I'm just gagged.
yes,
Yeah.
and
This
that
is a great
is
example.
that is what it is like.
Yes.
It
Yes.
is, I know that this thing in front of me is not safe. We all know that you shouldn't be eating raw chicken breast. If everyone else around you was, you'd be like, what on earth are you people doing? This is crazy.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same for kids with ARFID. Yeah.
I was going to say, for parents who want to gain a bit more information around the impact of strong sensory preferences, go back and listen to our sensory processing episode, because it will give you a lot of insight in terms of how those things can appear, how they impact the body, what kind of outputs you're going to see from your child, etc. So we've got that as well. But I think that raw chicken breast one, that's a fantastic example. Like, I just gagged.
Yeah.
So it gives me really great compassion
That's
for
what
what
it's
they might
like for
be
your
doing.
kiddos. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the recommendation is, certainly until you're able to speak to your doctor and dietitians and everything, is fed is best. Make sure your kids are having food. It doesn't matter what food. If you have to, my kiddo almost lived on things out of the freezer, basically ice cream, for a couple of months.
Yep.
And you try and get some slightly healthier versions in there if you can.
Fortify is the word we like to use. How can you fortify what you can get into them? If
So,
you need milk powder to milk,
exactly. But
do
initially,
what you can.
while you're waiting to talk to someone else, just any food that your child will eat is better than no food. You can present them with different food options, but every time you present your child with food, there should be at least one thing on their plate that is safe for them and they feel they can eat. That's just, little bit of
We
advice
have
until you
an
can talk to
episode with
someone
a
else.
nutritionist coming up this season, so that will be
Awesome.
really good around that. Yeah.
So ARFID is another tricky one, and it does, kind of cross everything. But very much sensory, but also, and this will actually lead into some other things, I think it's also kind of this sensitivity in general and heightened sensitivity. I certainly noticed that for my kiddos, they were heading into burnout. Their capacity to eat different foods massively decreased. So as everything else is becoming overwhelming, so from that point of view, it does almost slightly come back to that element of control in a lot of other eating disorders, in that there's too much other stuff that is overwhelming and I'm not really dealing with, so I'm not going to try anything new. Anything that slightly wasn't right for whatever reason, whether it was textural, taste, whatever, is just a complete no. And it does just start to shrink down. And so
in its own way, there's a great canary in the coal mine.
if your kids' food preferences are starting to shrink, then you need to look at your child's schedule and massively
Pare it back.
Again, reduce demands, cater to sensory as much as you can, because it is a very good flag. Which kind of brings us on to sort of other sensitivities. So there's sort of a very vague kind of catch-all of central sensitization syndromes. And they're things like irritable bowel syndrome, migraine.
It's also a weird catch-all that doesn't really explain anything, but yes.
Yeah, temporal mandible joint syndrome, like TMJ, which is the pain through the jaw and the clicking. Then there's myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, ME/CFS, and fibromyalgia. So they all come in under this vague central sensitization syndromes, which effectively is kind of saying your body is hypersensitized, and so it's going to be wacky and is doing things it wouldn't ordinarily do.
Yeah.
But you'll also notice that a lot of those things in that list are also things that aren't always well respected by medical
Yep.
professionals.
Yep.
Like fibromyalgia and ME/CFS, you get a lot of people who will try and argue
Roll
that
their eyes.
those
Yeah.
things exist.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm not going to enter into that side of things, but it just
Mm.
highlights again how difficult it is for everyone to get the support that they need when you can come up against a lot of people in the medical fields who aren't
Believe it
interested
doesn't
in
exist.
them. Recent stats are suggesting that at least 60% of autistic adults will experience symptoms of central sensitization syndromes. So one or more of those that I listed. So again, very high. And I think we are beginning to understand that it's not necessarily a genetic, oh, well, if you genetically got autism, you're genetically going to have these conditions. It potentially actually more is, again, how our body systems, we've got our sensory systems that we can kind of understand what's happening sensorily wise. Our body is kind of doing the same kind of thing in relation to all of these other stresses that we can't really.
So I've got
manage.
PTSD and generalized anxiety disorder, right? And I can tell you that when my demands are heightened, I have IBS and TMJ, and those things will both be exacerbated.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like the brain gut connection is extremely strong.
Yeah.
So when my brain is overwhelmed, my gut is going to struggle. And the more stressed I am, the more I clench my jaw. And the greater the amount of pain that then goes through my body. And so, and I'm not dealing with walking through the world all the time, constantly feeling like it's a lot more challenging than it should be. So, you can imagine the magnification of that and what its impact would be.
Definitely. Another one, and again, this is kind of how you hold stress, but they call it coat hanger pain. So sort of from your neck across your shoulders, where a coat hanger would be in your clothes. Again, that is a very common. And it is this thing of, and it gets to this really funny point of it's all in your head, but it's legitimately all in your head in terms of, yes, we know it's the stress and we know it's the anxiety and we know it's all of these other things that we're trying to deal with. It's putting it into our body, but we're still feeling it in our body and we still need to deal with the fact that we're feeling it.
And I think we're beginning the journey, but we're still far from where we need to be in terms of understanding the mental health connection to physical health. Something being in your head is not an excuse for it to not have a physical manifestation.
Yes, exactly. Because ultimately, if you think about what pain is literally how our brain interprets signals coming from our body.
Correct.
So
yes. That something is wrong. That's how our body tells us something's wrong.
But kind of at its core, everything's in your head.
Correct.
But it's not because you're crazy and it's not because it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It just all sits in your head. So anyway, that's exactly. A random ADHD,
We call them side quests and we love side quests.
I think maybe one last thing before.
Yeah. I noticed you've got the fertility things on here and I think that's really important to talk about.
Yeah. So wanted to sort of talk about, for girls in particular, hormones and then also, a lot of sort of menstrual stuff. So we've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, otherwise known as PMDD. They are, again, all very, high in terms of what autistic and ADHDers will experience. Potentially up to 92% of autistic women and 46% of ADHD women will experience PMDD, but estimates vary as they do with a lot of studies. But again, a very high
enormous.
portion. So if you've got girls who are having painful periods, they are having bloody painful periods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get them to
Parents pick up and take notice. Yeah.
link in with a good, oh my God, women's health doctor. Words.
OBGYN.
Yes. Gynae. Yes. Yeah, definitely start earlier rather than later.
Mm.
Would be
Mm.
my advice, because
Yeah.
chances are it's not going to get better. And then, so they're sort of the disorders that we know more commonly occur. Then we also just have how hormones impact our brain,
Mm.
especially ADHDers, but I think it kind of affects, I think your hormones affect sort of your brain function in general. It's just more
Yes.
noticeable with your ADHD.
Yep.
I'm not an expert in hormones in any way, shape, or form, but basically, estrogen impacts
Mm-hmm.
how your cognitive functions work,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
specifically affect dopamine and serotonin,
Mm-hmm.
which means your ADHD symptoms can often become more severe when
Mm-hmm.
estrogen levels are lower. And estrogen is one of I think the thing that varies the most across a female
Mm.
cycle.
Yes. Yep.
So basically, some women will say that there'll be certain days where their
Mm.
meds pretty much have absolutely no effect.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's
Yep.
another thing to just know. So if you've got girls who are kind of struggling to get to school when they've got their
Mm.
period,
Yep.
uh, it's not a cop out. It's not just a I don't want to go. It's potentially a thing of actually school's just way too overwhelming on those
Yep.
particular days. And if you
Mm-hmm.
can, that's fine. Let them stay home if you can.
Yeah. Completely.
Yeah.
I just did a quick little squirrel Google while we were chatting because I was interested. And the reason I was interested, I was once again thinking about Mr. Nine, having just turned 9. He
Mm.
is a tween. And we're starting to see some hormone
Yeah.
responses happening. And so I was just having a quick look and about tweens and early adolescents and estrogen in boys, and it fluctuates in boys as well.
Mm.
So, specifically, I think around your serotonin, your dopamine, and your clear brain function / brain fog, I think that's really great for parents to keep in mind of something cyclic that they may see with their boys between the ages of, say, about 8 and 15 as well.
Yeah. And I think, and with boys, because their hormone changes are obviously very different and happen in a very different way, but they still
Mm.
have massive hormone changes.
Yes.
You can get sort of these pockets and spikes of very interesting and different behavior, which
Yeah.
might seem to be quite out of character or out of the blue, and you can't quite figure out why. It might just be hormones.
Hormones.
Ride it
Yeah.
out and it might get better.
Fingers crossed. I have a Sterling one at the moment. Every time I tell him something, he goes, "Yeah, got it."
Oh, yeah.
I'm waiting for that one to pass.
It gets to the point that they know more than their parents.
Yeah.
And I've just lent into that. And I now get them to be the expert in certain stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm taking that. That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Why not?
Why not? They learn.
And they do know more than me in certain things.
Yeah.
So I think that's there is a lot more to it, but I think that is probably physical health in a bit of a nutshell.
Yes.
Yeah, so there are clusters. Basically, I think probably my recommendation to parents is expect that your child is going to have a co-occurring physical health condition, and you just might not have worked out which one or what it is.
Yeah.
But kind of expect that there's going to be something.
Yeah.
And if there's not, great.
And I think the other thing that's come up in this conversation around physical health that's really important to note, and it's not specifically a comorbidity, but it's something that's really important about understanding about your neurodivergent child and their physical health, and that is that they may not always know to tell you.
Yeah, definitely.
So they might get a really bad cold, and if we don't catch it, it could turn into pneumonia because they're not going to tell you. They may kick something really badly and break a bone in their foot and just not let you know. So we do have to be observant on their behalf and curious, and just keep a lookout for anything that might seem a little more unusual than their normal unusual.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if we think about, there's a lot of autistic kids who are nonverbal, and so you automatically are going to be more likely to try and be observant and try and work out what's going on. For those who have kids who are verbal, just because they have quite good verbal skills in some areas still doesn't
Yes.
mean they're going to be able to actually tell you some of these really important things.
Correct. Or realize that they're important.
Yeah.
I mean, and that goes for all kids. Sometimes kids just don't get that it's important. So, yeah, it's just exacerbated in this circumstance.
Yeah, definitely.
How are you feeling about diving into mental health?
Yeah, I reckon we can. Oh, before we do, I do have a couple of just random interesting stats in terms of kids. Autistic children experience 40 to 60% of autistic children experience gastrointestinal issues.
Okay.
So again, your constipation or your IBS or all of those sorts of things are really high. Autistic children are 2 times more likely to experience chronic pain. And then 76% of neurodivergent women experience chronic pain.
Wow.
3/4.
Wow. Ongoing, unresolvable pain.
Yeah.
Wow.
Although chronic pain can be somewhat resolvable depending on the pain. But
if it's investigated correctly, yes.
Yes. Yeah. And also sometimes it's a thing of supported correctly. It's not always about knowing what the cause is or whatever, but getting the
Proper
right support
pain
from people who
management.
understand and can sort of basically, again, help you crack your brain.
Yes.
But it took me well over 10 years to find someone who could help me in that way, because so doesn't mean everyone has to live with it forever, but 3/4.
I'm going to pop my advocacy hat back on again and just say, and I think I've said this in episodes before, if whether it's a psychologist, psychiatrist, doctor, OT, speech pathologist, principal, doesn't really matter. If it doesn't feel right and they're not taking you seriously, there is nothing wrong with voting with your feet and getting the F out of there.
Definitely.
So if you know something's wrong and they won't listen, find someone else.
Yeah, because the experts don't know everything.
Correct.
No one can know everything. And unfortunately, if they don't have an interest in the particular area of whatever's going on for you, or if they don't have a very good knowledge of neurodiversity and how that impacts everything, then the information they give you is likely to not be helpful for your situation.
Miss 5 at the moment, she has recurring stomach pain. And every time I've brought it up with our GP, he keeps telling us that it's probably constipation and keeps sending her for ultrasounds. And I'm like, look, it's not. It's worry pain. And whether it's manifesting physically or not, it's worry pain. This is her over feeling something and the responses in her gut. How do we support her in that? So, this is me telling myself and taking my own advice. I need to see somebody else about it.
Yes. Moral of the story is stop talking to GP about it, because he's only got one response. It's not going to change.
Exactly.
And we've ruled out constipation.
Correct.
Well, now we can talk to someone else and say we've ruled out constipation.
Yes.
It's something else. Yeah. And I think it is this thing of Miss 5 could then very much grow up thinking that the stomach pain is normal and there's nothing you can do about it, and the doctors have told me I'm fine.
Correct.
So don't tell anyone about it, because there's no point.
That's it. And that maybe that then gets emulated out to all discomfort.
Yeah, exactly. Because they didn't believe me about that, so why are they going to believe me about the next thing? Yeah. And and I could go off on a whole nother tangent, because it's part of what I I've done a few presentations on the gaslighting, effectively, from the medical profession. It's huge, and so it does very much.
Let's just call it out. When you're neurodivergent or you're the parent and carer of a neurodivergent child, you get gaslit all the damn time. You get gaslit in the medical industry. You get gaslit in the education space. You can be gaslit by people who think they're friends and family and they know better than you. Like, gaslighting's just an unfortunate reality that comes along with it. And we have to have incredibly thick skins, and we really need to feel like, and I've mentioned this before, I'm trying to find the right way to do a really great episode on advocacy and how to really build your own ability to feel like you are entitled to advocate. Because it can feel really daunting when you have someone you either believe cares about you and you care about, or someone who you believe is a professional is telling you that what you're saying is not true. And there's a whole mental health level that goes along with the basically the epidemic of gaslighting that we receive.
Yeah. And again, that just feeds into all of the mental health issues that we then develop.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. In terms of gaslighting, I had a child psychiatrist tell me that my child's issues were basically because of how I parented them.
Oh my God.
Not understanding that I was parenting my child in response to my child's needs.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just horrendous.
Yeah, and thankfully by that stage I was strong enough and I had, had support from sort of various communities, sort of like School Kind Australia and things like that, to be strong enough to basically just tell the doctor I disagreed with them and they could kind of shove it. But if that was me 6 or 12 months earlier, it would have broken me.
That is making me so emotional because as parents, we work so hard to understand our children and do what they need. And to have someone say that, and to not even say it in a way that is meant to be supportive or educational.
No, and pretty much the way they tried to support me was with resources for kids who were like 3 or 4 when my child was 7 or 8.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Kind of this, autistic kids are immature, so this will work on them. Like, it was, the psychiatrist had absolutely no idea. You're a child psychiatrist. How can you not understand neurodiversity for a start? But yeah, it was just horrific, absolutely horrific.
That is just, and this is the thing as well, and I know we're side questing again, but I think this is a really important side quest. If you are a specialist where someone comes to see you and the issue you've got is more complex than your knowledge, say I am not the right specialist for you. Yeah. Like, just do everyone a favor and say, I think you're probably better seeing someone different. Yeah. I'm not the right person for you.
And if you can, help them find someone different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or go away and educate yourself.
Correct.
So you can potentially help these clients.
Correct.
Or at least make sure you're not saying the complete wrong advice, wrong information.
And once again, big side quest. I know this is not what we were originally talking about, but neurodivergence in this day and age should not have to be a specialty.
No. Although, do you know that psychiatrists don't actually really learn about ADHD as part of their training?
It's like talking about how teachers don't get trained about mental health and neurodivergence in their education diplomas. What the heck?
Yeah. Basically, they had all these Schedule 8 drugs and pediatricians were prescribing them, and all of a sudden they had kids who turned over 18 and they're like, who prescribes these now? Oh, we'll get the psychiatrists to do it. And didn't tell the psychiatrist.
Well, for a very long time, they believed you grew out of ADHD.
Yeah.
So, yay, medicine. Sorry. There are amazing doctors out there as well.
Yes. And hands down, I love my child's pediatrician. So, yeah,
Yes. Same for mine.
this,
We
this
are
is
very lucky.
this is very
I
much,
just hear a lot of horror stories, unfortunately.
this is very much not about bagging individual people within the system. There's a lot of things about the system that is broken,
Correct.
and even the way that medicine just tries to pull everything apart and make it all about little things rather than the very holistic big picture. So it is more about the system itself and Western medicine, not evolving, even though we've had so many steps forward in great things, but the way it thinks about things has not evolved in a very long time.
All right, I'm going to pull out our map, our episode map.
Yes. Let's get back on track.
So mental health.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So as we touched on earlier, a big thing with mental health is the suicide risk. So autistic people are almost 3 times more likely, and autistic people without an intellectual disability are almost 5 times more likely to die by suicide than a non-autistic person.
Wow.
So if you're autistic with an intellectual disability, that's 3 times more likely. And if you're autistic without an intellectual disability, 5 times.
Oh my goodness. And how much does that let you know that it's all about not feeling like you fit in? It's about being aware of how people are making you feel in your own environment.
Yeah. And it's also, so they sort of found that a lot of the standard suicide risk factors hold true, but they're sort of more pronounced. But also some unique risk factors were like camouflaging or masking.
Yep.
And unmet support needs. So and that kind of leads into burnout, which is where I was going to go next anyway. But this trying to fit in, even when you don't actually understand why you don't fit in, or how you can fit in, but you just constantly try, or you do everything you can to become that perfect child so that teachers like you, and all of that effort and all of that extra thought process and everything hatches up with you eventually. It has to. And so then you can hit burnout.
Yeah.
So autistic burnout effectively sort of results from chronic life stress and a mismatch between the expectations and abilities without then having adequate support. They'll sort of say that you're in burnout if you've had sort of at least a 3-month long-term sort of pervasive exhaustion, loss of function, reduced tolerance to stimulus. One of the big issues, especially if you have, probably more so when you don't have a diagnosis, but I suspect it still happen, it gets mistaken for depression.
Yeah, okay. Yep, that makes sense.
Because the fatigue and the sort of lack of ability to do things, you must be depressed. The issue is, if you think about best practice for depression, is set a routine, go out for walks, speak to people, try and kind of trick your brain into life's kind of normal and you'll start feeling better. That is the complete wrong advice for burnout. Burnout needs rest. That's it. It doesn't need walks. It doesn't need getting up at a certain time every day. It certainly doesn't need talking to people.
It needs you to place your needs as the most important need every single day.
And it needs you to be okay with the fact that you can't and you're not going to be doing all the things that you used to do. And that includes basic hygiene. And it needs you to kind of be somewhat okay with that, so you can accept that it's not happening and it will happen one day, but it's not happening right now.
Yep.
And I'm not going to feel guilty about it, because otherwise you're just wasting brain space on
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, so that I think is a really big issue. If burnout gets mistaken for depression and treated
Mm.
as if it's depression,
Mm.
you're kind
You're
of
fulfilling a
never
cycle.
going to recover
Yeah,
from your
come out it.
burnout if you
Mm.
do what people tell you you should be doing. And if you
Yeah.
do what you need to do, everyone, some people, society at large, is just going to think you're lazy and you don't care and you don't want to get better. Yeah. And from true burnout, recovery can take years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So burnout is a massive one. And as we
Mm.
kind of alluded to before, if you start to see a reduced ability to deal with sensory stuff, if that is all starting to close in and their
Yep.
capacity to manage these things is narrowing, that
Mm.
window of tolerance is getting smaller,
Mm.
do what you can
Mm.
then. Don't
Mm.
wait for it to
Mm.
keep getting worse. If
Yep.
that if you have a day off a week and that means you can keep your kid home on that day and they
Yeah.
only go to school 4 days a week, you may find that actually on those 4 days that they go to school, they have the capacity to actually learn when they're there,
Mm.
rather than going 5 days and they kind of have no capacity to do anything.
Or organise with your school to pick them up at 2, so the day isn't as long and they're not receiving as many demands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
If you notice things like that, if you can be proactive,
mm,
be proactive.
I was going to say school can't. So if you don't normally have a school can'ter and suddenly you're seeing school can't, or the prevalence of school can't is increasing, that's probably another huge indicator as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Because if you think about the fact that school can't is literally they cannot go to school,
Mm.
and often they cannot go to school because they are in burnout and
Mm.
they can't really function at all. Often, and this is not all, but often you will find if you've got kids who are school can't, and quite significantly, you'll generally find that they're pretty much life can't.
Yeah.
It is often that it's not just actually about school. They might be
No.
more likely to be able to do small things on the weekend, but they
Mm.
don't have their normal capacity. It's not like,
Mm.
oh, I haven't been at school for 5 days, so now I can bounce off the walls and run
Mm.
around and do all of these amazing things on the weekend.
Yeah.
It's often a lot more pervasive, but it becomes a lot more obvious around school because that's the thing that
Well, they're
expected
there
to be
5
doing.
days a week from 9 till 3:30, so it's such a large part of their life and it's such a clear line in the middle of their life.
And the
Um,
expectation is that they're there and that we shouldn't be
exactly.
cancelling. Whereas other
That's it.
things, there's less expectation, so it's easier to not do them and not notice the impact.
I have it's not guilt, but it's just that thing you get from having a little bit of hindsight. I now have my oldest is now virtual school.
Yeah.
And it took 3 months of extreme behavior at home, being sent home in the middle of the day almost every day from school, aggression, escalation in aggression, dopamine seeking, extreme dopamine seeking, for me to realize that I needed to pull him from school. The demands were just too much.
Uh, you know, I try not to feel that guilt because, when we know better, we do better. But I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you it took me a lot longer than that. I had a breaking point
Yeah.
where it was a horrific morning for every single one of us in the household. And we didn't get much art to school that day. And I just looked at my husband and I said, never again.
Yeah.
I am not trying to force them to school anymore because I can't do it. It is just breaking us. It is breaking our relationship with our child. No.
Mm.
But it took me a long time to get to that point.
I think it's part of, as a parent, your gradual letting go of certain expectations and saying this is an expectation that even though socially people say this is what should happen, I'm now willing to let this go for my child.
Yeah. And I think it's also having the time to process that actually a lot of this is school has failed my
Mhm.
child and my family.
Mhm.
And I think once you can kind of get to the point of sort of getting more to that, it's kind of like, okay, well, because school has failed them, we have to
Mhm.
do something different.
Yes.
And if people are going to raise their eyebrows, people are going to whatever, but actually I don't care because it's nothing to do with them. It's what we need to do for our child's well-being. Yeah,
Yep.
but it can
And
take us.
we don't have educational systems, just like we were talking about in the medical space. We don't have educational
Mm,
systems yet that correctly
yeah,
help our schools and teachers to support our children.
yeah. In our current society, all of the systems are broken in terms
Correct.
of what type of support neurodivergent people need.
Hmm. But the school has a wheelchair ramp.
Isn't that great?
I'm glad you got the joke.
Um, yes,
Oh.
it is a lot easier for everyone to provide accessibility needs for visible issues.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to understand why the support's required when it's a visible
Mhm.
need.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I have nothing against wheelchair ramps. I think everybody would know that, but I'm just going to
Yeah.
clarify.
And again, massive side quest. It goes into universal design, which means that, okay, we've put this here because it's great for wheelchair users, but it's also great for mums with prams. It's also
Mhm.
great for people who struggle with steps. So it's adding something that a lot of people can benefit from, and anyone who doesn't want or need a ramp doesn't have to use the ramp. They can use the steps. Or if
Yes.
they do need to use the ramp, everyone can access a ramp.
Just like providing a building that has a low sensory stimulation space whenever somebody, whether they're neurodivergent or not, needs to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where if universal design in terms of our sort of sensory systems was actually considered, you then have these things available, as you said, for anyone who needs them for any reason. If you have a kid who, is, one of the most neurotypical kids you've ever come across, but they've just found out their grandparent has died, they're
Yes.
potentially not going to have that same capacity to sit in the classroom like they normally do. And to have
Mm-hmm.
somewhere there where they can be supported would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, massive side quest. I'm very aware we need to get back to mental health.
It's so fun. I've got the map, see?
Yes, so in terms of other mental health conditions, obviously, well, like ADHD and autism go very hand in hand.
Friends?
um, Up to 79% of autistic adults have met the diagnostic criteria for a co-occurring psychiatric condition.
Yeah.
And as we've kind of touched on, whether that's sometimes a misdiagnosis, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the fact that, you've got anxiety because of trying to live as an autistic person, or whether that is also that there are, I think, you know, words, schizophrenia,
Yes.
bipolar, all of those things I think are also higher within autistic and ADHDers. So again, there's a huge co-occurring, pretty much I think nearly any mental health condition you can think of.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of that is more a genetic or sort of predisposition, and some of it is more just a lifestyle thing.
Just trying to live in this world.
Exactly, just trying to live in this world.
Correct.
But
Similarly,
yeah,
there's data that says that depending on where the data comes from, between 20 to 60% of neurodivergent people report or can be diagnosed for PTSD.
yes. And I suspect it's probably more,
The
probably
higher
a
end.
lot higher. Um,
Yeah.
and like trauma is sort of a whole nother discussion.
Mm.
But I think one thing to be really aware of for our autistic kids is that trauma is how it's perceived by the person experiencing it.
Correct.
So an event can be traumatic for them, even if it's what we would think of as normal or not out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
I now am very aware of the fact that my child has school-based trauma.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
because of any particular single event where they experienced bullying or anything like that.
Mm.
It is from being in that environment that
Long-term
wasn't meeting their
exposure.
needs, where at times the classrooms could become quite chaotic.
Yep.
Just all of those things. Like, it took me a long time to really understand and get my head around, but
Mm.
I now know that they have experienced very clearly school-based trauma.
Yeah.
So, but if anyone was kind of trying to do a thing of going, well, how can you have PTSD? You never experienced a traumatic event.
Mm. So the interesting thing about that is that a single traumatic event is much easier to actually resolve itself than something that has occurred as something that was long term systemically uncomfortable, made you feel like you were unsafe. It's going to be much harder for somebody to be able to overcome that,
Yeah.
which is definitely something that is really poorly understood around things like PTSD and trauma.
Yeah.
I think something that's also really important to just to mention is specifically, I think, for people who might observe a child, an autistic child, any child who has a traumatic event, is that the body stores symptomology of that as a feeling of being unsafe, and that until that is resolved in them, anything that reminds their body, not them rationally, but their body of that event, will create a fear response. So my Mr. Nine is adopted. So I don't have a full understanding of his history before he came to us at 3.5. Anytime he is around a human-like statue or a mannequin, he loses his mind.
Wow.
Absolutely loses his mind.
Yeah.
Screams we have to remove him from the situation. That says to me somewhere in that little body is a memory of something connected with that is unsafe.
Yeah. And that happened at some point before 3.5, where a lot of people would say you don't really have memories.
Correct. But body memory and cognitive memory are two very different things.
Definitely.
And I could stand there and say, why on earth are you screaming about a mannequin? But to him, his body feels so in danger in that particular moment. And we just have to respect that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if anyone tries to convince you that, like graded exposure will help our autistic kids with their
Not at all.
anxieties,
No.
no.
No. No. And look, I'm not a psychologist, so I cannot in any way vouch for this, but I know that there is a lot of investigation going on at the moment when it comes to trauma for autistic or neurodivergent individuals. It's not finalized yet, but there is a lot of research going on as to whether or not EDMR is the better method for dealing with trauma, because it isn't about exposure therapy, and therefore their brain can process it in a different way. So watch this space. Keep researching. If you've got a kidlet that, needs to work through some things, there may be something in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was looking even at anxiety, how anxiety presents in autistic people, and the best way to, sort of support anxiety, is very different to generalized anxiety in non-autistic people. So, and unfortunately, we get into this situation where all of the research is, done on typical brains. Also,
Yes.
a huge amount of the research is done on men, which we kind of know when we talk about, oh yeah, autism, it's all about little white boys in terms of history of how it was, you know,
Understood.
diagnosing, understood, identifying.
Mhm.
Listening to something recently, and one of the reasons why so much of the research is done on men is because their hormones are so much more sort of
Level.
level. So
Mm.
if you start trying to do research on women, there's so many more variables, it makes it harder. So the easiest thing to do is just not do research on women. Because isn't that a good solution for all of us women? Yeah.
So currently looking absolutely stunned. It is something that I am navigating at the moment, having two boys that I've gone through the process of, and having a 5-year-old girl, and navigating the difference in people's perception. And as a parent, when you know, you know. Especially if you've already learned how to be cued into the signs and to know when behavior is, veering off what people would classify as neurotypical. And the amount of times I've had people say to me, no, she's just a rambunctious girl, or she's just 5.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if she was displaying the boy version of these behaviors, she wasn't masking as heavily as girls do, we would be having an entirely different conversation. But there's no data.
Yeah. And it's, like we know it's a thing sort of in regards to autism, but across just so many things, like, it's easier for them to research on men. So let's just do that. And that's why so many things that don't do this while you're breastfeeding. It's not because they know it's going to be bad. It's just because they've never researched whether or not it's good. So it's easier to just say, no.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That just made my head hurt.
They don't know most of these things. And this is not me saying go and do them. Not at all. But it is kind of gets too hard to research. So it's easier for them to just send it out saying, just don't. And so we've covered ourselves.
Yay to being a woman.
It's not lovely.
Oh, God. Whew. Wow. Thank goodness we're out there fighting for our girls, right? Like, that's all I can say.
And another amazing research, given that we're talking about girls. If you haven't heard of them, go. We'll link in the show notes. Yellow ladybugs.
Yellow ladybugs, I will kiss the ground they walk on. They are amazing.
Yeah. Best resource you can get if you've got an autistic girl or gender diverse young person.
And thoroughly supportive online community. The most beautiful, supportive online community.
Yeah. Couple of things, just, cycling back to mental health to get us on track before we leave. But also let's talk about the girls. 80% of autistic females remain undiagnosed or misdiagnosed at age 18.
That just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Breaks my heart.
Yeah. So the amount of women in their 30s who suddenly learn that actually you don't have borderline personality disorder. You're autistic. And you're traumatized because you're autistic and you didn't know it and the world didn't treat you very well. It's not borderline. Yeah. So 80% of, at 18, 80% of women don't know they're autistic.
Now, I would have to look it up to find out what it is, but I also believe borderline personality disorder in the DSM-6 is being renamed because it is such a problematic.
Yes, it has. I think it's kind of personality disorder, and then it has a few words.
Qualifier. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and no, I'm not even going to go there.
This is just the reality when we have podcasts. People who are passionate about topics and we've got knowledge about things we want to share. It's what happens. I think my guests are really used to it. I often say, anyone listening will have heard me say this before, I often think that the gems come through in a side quest because it comes out because it's something that needs to be said.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I've got one more stat, which I think
Mm.
is quite good, especially if we're talking about that tween teen.
Mm.
Um, so children diagnosed with ADHD have an elevated risk of experiencing suicidal thoughts, behaviors, attempts, self-harm, particularly among boys. I found quite interesting.
Mm.
By age 14,
Mm.
they are 11 times more likely to have experienced a suicidal thought, attempt, or plan, and
Wow.
25 times more likely to have engaged in self-harm.
Wow.
So it's another one
Yeah.
to just be very aware of, to be very open with your kids. If you yourself have any history of struggling with your mental health,
Mm.
talk to your kids about that in an age appropriate way, but talk to
Yep.
your kids about that so they know they can talk to you if and when
Yes.
they need to.
Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah, because we know that
It's prevalent.
it's prevalent that
It's
most of
prevalent.
these kids are going to experience more than just their autism or more than just
Yeah.
their autism and their ADHD.
Yep.
We know that, so let's just be prepared that
Absolutely.
something's going to happen.
Yep.
We're on the lookout for it, and hopefully we'll
Yeah.
spot it when it comes rather than our kids finding out 20 years later.
And look, I think that's, I think that's a perfect place for me to summarize to wrap this conversation up, because once again, I'll acknowledge this has been big. It's been heavy. Um, there's been a lot of risk that's been discussed, and that can feel really, really intense. I really do hope that when you're listening to this, you've got an opportunity to like sit in the car for 5 minutes afterwards and listen to some music or do something to just give yourself some space for the gravity of this. It's really, really big, and you may take days to process everything that we've said. When you think about it in the context of your little person that you love fiercely and you really want to protect, it's a lot to take in. We will most definitely be posting resources in the show notes, including some amazing infographics that we've got that we can share. Thank you, Leah. Um, the the way I want to finish this, I think, is to say that those people who are listening, you are here because you want to know about your child. You want to advocate for your child. You want to do the best for your child. And you are the person who is in a position to watch for what may be happening, to watch for any physical symptomology, any changes in behavior that show that there may be some mental health challenges going on. I think the thing that I'm sure, Leah, you would agree with me. The thing to say here is don't wait, don't doubt yourself, trust your gut and do what you need to do. If you feel like you're not being listened to and your person needs more support, go somewhere else, and just keep fighting for it, because we are the people who are going to be there to hold them up when they really need it. And you've got this, because if you are out here doing the learning to be able to know what you're looking for, you are going to be their champion.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to honor that. I just think that the more you can empower yourself to understand your child, the better you can do for them. So good on you for taking the time to find it out. Did you want to add anything to that, Leah?
I think probably the only thing I want to add is all of these statistics, and these very heavy statistics, are based on history.
Yes.
So they're based on, often, certainly a lot of the female statistics are based on people who weren't diagnosed as children.
Mm.
Um, or even when they were diagnosed, the way they were supported or treated was not at all neuroaffirming. So yes, these are scary. Yes, these are confronting. Yes, they may still happen to your child, but if you are raising them with all of the knowledge that you are gaining, all of the neurodiversity affirming practices in place, advocating for them, to get better support, not uh, not having unrealistic expectations for your kids,
Yep.
reducing
Yep.
those demands when you know that they need them. If you are doing all of those things, then all of those things are reducing the likelihood that your kid is going to be one of these statistics. And hopefully in 20 years' time, these statistics are going to be massively different because of how we're supporting our kids now.
Yes, we can be part of changing those numbers for the future. Yeah. Yeah. That's such a beautiful, powerful thing to say. Leah, I feel so grateful for this conversation and also for you taking the time to actually speak on such an intense and heavy topic for us. I really, I just utmost respect for being able to share this with us because it is a big, heavy conversation. It's not an easy one to have. And so just sending you all of the thanks from the You Can Grow Your Own Way community for providing us with an amazing toolkit to know what to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, no worries. I just want to be able to help people kind of avoid being where we were. So if I can share this knowledge and that helps people avoid that, then yeah, that's all I want to do. So yeah, thank you for the platform.
Amazing. All right. Well, that's it for You Can Grow Your Own Way. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to check the show notes on our website for any links and references. You can find us at youcangrowyourownway.podbean.com. And if you found this episode helpful, we would love you to help us get the word out. You can share the podcast, tell a friend, and be sure to click the follow or subscribe button so you can access all our new episodes. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram, where we would love to connect with you. You Can Grow Your Own Way recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this place, now known as Australia. We're coming to you from Jabberung, Jawajali and Wadawurrung country, the country of our guest speaker, and from wherever you are listening. We respect the elders of the past and present, and we share our friendship and kindness.